Hey everyone, thank you for joining us. I'm really excited to be here. Those of you paying attention will notice that I am not Rina, and Rina is not here. But Rina has recorded something remotely for us. She couldn't be here in person. And the combination of what we're going to be talking about today is some best practice in terms of how to directly monetize an API ecosystem and marketplace. So for the few in the back who said you were thinking about doing this, this should be helpful. It's largely focused on the business side of what you need to do to get this right. And so just a bit of background on myself and Rina. So Rina is the API marketplace product lead at IQVIA. If you don't know IQVIA, they're about a $15 billion healthcare research and life sciences company located here in the US and abroad. And they focus on developing, they have a wide set of data that helps customers who are developing, doing drug research and medical research. And Hypercurrent, if you haven't heard of us, so Hypercurrent's a company that focuses on enabling API monetization for our customers. And we plug into all of the main API gateways and help do subscription management, metering, and rating, and things on top of an API gateway. So let's jump into what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to start by going over a bit of which types of companies are monetizing, which industries, and why they're doing it. And then we'll flip into some best practices if you're considering going down that path. Following up Jason's presentation is good because there's a lot of overlapping and where I can continue off from what he had to say as well. So first of all, the main industries that we see where monetization is picking up, if we look at the conversations we've had over the last year, about 70% of them have fallen into these two verticals, which matches nicely with this conference, given that this is two of the focuses for the conference. So I thought I'd give a few examples from each. Rina will talk a lot about what they're doing directly at IQVIA. But one example she won't give today is just a really interesting use case where IQVIA has access to all of the prescriptions that are written by doctors across the US, as an example, and they can, via API, tell marketers by zip code where conditions are the most prevalent at any time of year, by week of year. So if you want to know where to advertise for asthma medication in a given year, in a given zip code, they can dial that in via API. And so that's an obvious use case where something is directly monetizable, and they're putting things like that into the marketplace that they're building. On the financial services side, maybe more traditional examples that we've heard of, because I've heard of them in several presentations this week, things like loan eligibility for a customer, or integrating that capability into brokerage systems. So if you've got a brokerage software system and you're going to pull up a customer record, API integration from partners can immediately tell you, here's an appropriate offer for that partner that would make sense to offer them, and there can be a monetizable opportunity there. So those are the industries. Next we'll go on and we'll talk about what are the real drivers for optimization, or drivers for monetization, sorry. And there's really two. You know, you're either disrupting or you're being disrupted. And I like this slide, it makes me smile. The reality is that probably more customers talk to us when they're on the no choice side of the slide, because what's often happening is that established companies who have had a traditional software product that is only purchased with a high price tag, so we're typically dealing with larger enterprises, are losing pieces of that business to new upstarts that are offering point solutions available via API. And the only way that they can compete is to unbundle parts of what they do and now offer that as a service via API. So that's one industry motion we're seeing happening quite a bit. And the other side, if I use a financial services example, I probably can use one on both sides here. We're dealing in a lot of underserved geographies where more banking takes place on phones than it does in traditional banks. And so in places like the Philippines or in lots of countries in Africa, the banks are on the being disrupted side and have realized that the one way that they can win back the business is by developing a rich and monetizable API ecosystem to make themselves attractive to the startups that are actually stealing a lot of their revenue. And so the best second prize for them there is that they can become the bank of the fintech disruptor, and then they can find opportunities to monetize through doing that. On the other side, the mobile operators who have built banks on phones have rich sets of data where they know not only who you are, but what you purchase and how much money's in your bank account, and there's all kinds of opportunities for them, and they're often disrupting the traditional banks. But when you look at the enterprise space, the example, if we probably look at this conference 4 or 5 years ago, monetization was it was talked about as developer-to-developer monetization. And what we see in enterprise-to-enterprise monetization is not pennies per click or dollars per click, it's annual subscription revenue, just like traditional SaaS products, but sold as APIs. And there's one example that from about 2018, GlaxoSmithKline and 23andMe formed a partnership where they're paying $50 million a year for access to the genomic data from 23andMe. And while that's not an API-only story, that's the kind of subscriptions that are available when you start establishing these enterprise partnerships. However, the problem in the past for a lot of these companies is that there is no friction or low friction way to onboard new customers and test out those integrations so there's a wider pool for their sales teams to sell into. And self-service sign up to API partnerships like this, where you can start small and grow big, is a new sales motion for a lot of these enterprise customers that can be enabled via API. And Rina will talk about that a bit when she comes into her presentation. So now that we've talked a bit about the drivers, I will try to extend some practical advice. It's a really good follow-on to what Jason said, because some of the same things we have here. But if you're considering doing this, the key thing that we always talk to our customers about is you can't solve every problem before you start, and it's really important to look at it as an MVP mindset when you get started. So the two common misconceptions that often come in are that building an API-based product that you're going to monetize as a technology product. And I give credit to a lot of the engineers who are the ones who contact us first because they realize there's value in their data and their services, but they forget that somebody has to sell it and market it. And so there's a lot of business partnership that needs to come along with that. And so it's more than if you build it, you will come as well. And so we talked about I think in the last presentation as well, you need an executive sponsor from both technology and business to pull this off. And Rina will talk about her experience in IQVIA of how the two really needed to come together to make the product come to life. And then the next most valuable tip that I could give you is, if you're considering doing this for the first time, that you should look across your business, and there was an example in the back of the room before. If you've got partners already using your product, that is the best way to get started on monetizing, because they will help you build the product the first time. And there's a lot of advantages I'll talk about as we go through. So it's a big leapfrog if you can find a customer who is willing to build the product with you together. And then the biggest misconception we deal with in the beginning is that many companies will say, we know we want to monetize, we know there's an opportunity to monetize, but we're not ready yet. And, this isn't done, or that isn't done. Or actually, I'm glad you talked before me, because they'll say, well, we've given away for free forever, so how do we go back? And that happens all the time. So the reality, though, is that maturity follows revenue and not the reverse. And so if you try to figure out all the problems in advance, you often never get past the starting line. And so it's intuitive maybe when I say it this way, but you get trapped in this all the time. And we see customers say, they'd like our help building a 1.5-year plan to get all the technology ready, get the marketing ready, and then launch the product, and then the revenue will come. That project's impossible to get funded. Whereas going out and saying, we have this partner who's willing to use our product, and we want to do a POC, and it's going to cost us this much money, after which we have a repeatable model, that gets funded all the time. So again, like I said, maybe it looks like it makes sense on the slide, but people get trapped in this all the time. So if you have a partner who's willing to go with you, start there. So I said we're going to get to MVP, and we're going to try to do it simply, but the problem is there is a lot of other stuff that's not technology that has to be figured out to launch your first product. And so I'm going to go through each of these areas and try to give just 2 or 3 tips on how to approach each of these inside of your organization in a way that gets you to the finish line in months, not years. So technology readiness, we assume we've got ticked, because most of the gateways have some technology built in. Hypercurrent puts additional functionality on top of that to help deal with monetization. But the technical boxes you can usually tick. So then we move on to, and if you're doing this for the first time, how do you develop a price for something where you can't look across and maybe you don't have a direct competitor in this space? And back to, if you have a partner that's helping you build it, this is where they're a huge help. We advocate a concept that comes from the media world called value testing. Value testing is where you get a partner to launch with you and actually tell you the value they receive from using your integration when it's done. And then you use that to price your product. And you might say, well, why would someone tell me all the value I generated so I can charge them more? And you have to structure it right. So usually with the first partner, you set a not to exceed price. So no matter how much value that you deliver, they'll pay a fixed amount. Or you might agree that they'll pay 50% of the market price for the first 3 years of the partnership, as give you both incentive to get off the ground. So that works quite well and takes some of the confusion out of trying to figure out your first price. Next up, commercial and financial. So especially if you don't work for a software company, this is really hard because you go to your finance team and tell them you want to build a software business and all the variables look different than what they're used to. But again, the scope here is critical. You want to launch with 1 or 2 partners. You want to do a POC, and you need to make sure you're thinking that this first customer is not going to deliver cost recovery, because that's not how it works. And then the first time you bring a finance person in and you say, I'm collecting money via my API, they'll say, well, how are we going to integrate it with our back office? And that can just take you down a rat hole of endless proportions. And Jason said at the end, you can use duct tape and baling wire. This is one place where I think it makes sense in the beginning. When you have 1 customer, 2 customers, everybody can figure out how to get that much information into a financial system. But if you need to integrate with ERP, there are ways to do it. It just shouldn't be your first priority. So moving on to the next one, if those previous things were enterprise hurdles to get over, these would be hurdles stacked on top of each other, wrapped in barbed wire and electrified. These are the ones these can kill a project. And so the way that we help customers get through this, first of all, that the partner here is this is probably the biggest leapfrog you can get if you start with a partner, because they have a contract with you. Their liability terms are laid out in it, indemnities, all the things that take forever are actually laid out, and you have a basis to start from. But if that's not the case, then again, approaching this as a proof of concept where you're going to prove the model versus try to figure everything out up front will help your security team and your compliance team to actually give you guidance as opposed to saying yes or no, and hopefully that's the way you can work with these teams. And then you come back once you've figured out some of these things and going back to the first launch. And Rina actually talked about how they did that, where the first APIs they launched were painful, but now subsequent ones they can just turn off the crank at IQVIA. And then the last in this group, kind of put them all together. How do I enable my sales, my customer success, marketing teams? In general, we advise you inform them, but you don't ask a lot of them in this space, because just like Jason was saying before, as an API product manager or project team, you should be the one facing all this interaction. You'll learn the most by doing this yourself. And once you get down the line and you have something successful, the marketing team's going to be happy to tell that story with a partner who can help tell your story for you. And everything just works better if you push that to the back and don't worry about that all up front. So the next thing we'll go on to is I'm going to put up Rina, who's going to spend a few minutes telling you about her experience at IQVIA. And just on the off chance this video doesn't start playing, is this the computer up here that's running the slides, or is it back there?
Thank you, Jason. Today I want to start by sharing IQVIA's journey into the API marketplace. And I want to specifically focus on all the pillars that Jason talked about, and how IQVIA navigated some of those pillars, how we either worked around some of the problems we had and got creative, and brought this product to bear in the last 3 months. Let's focus first on the product management, packaging, and pricing, and the core pillar of technology readiness. For us, we treat pricing and packaging as a strategic decision. We have about 5, now 6 NLP, natural language processing APIs in the market right now. And the reason we have 5 or 6 under the same category is that they all sort of serve the same use case. But if we had APIs that served a specifically different kind of use case, then they would be priced differently. Pricing is, obviously a strategic decision. Is also an art form. You have to figure out what your competitor is doing, if you have a competitor in that space, and decide how you want to message the product and differentiate it from a competitor. If not, then you decide based on the value this product is providing to your customers and what kind of solutions they currently have in place. From a technology readiness play, we definitely looked at, redundancy, resiliency, ability to scale as volume goes up with the API. From the financial and commercial modeling, invoicing, ERP integration, and even the legal aspect, we are in a heavily regulated industry, so obviously we take this seriously. We had to create a matrix of criteria that were essential to clear the hurdle with legal and finance around data compliance, data integrity, data storage, whether it's level 4, level 5 kind of data, In addition, we also had to do a review of the technology that we were bringing to bear, especially with vendors like MuleSoft and Hypercurrent. I will say that the initial reviews for the first couple of APIs that went through the review, it took some time as we built out the matrix and understood what legal and financial folks were looking for. And once those hurdles were cleared, the subsequent APIs, it got to be a lot simpler and easier. From a sales and customer success enablement, we definitely had a little bit of a challenge initially because this product was so different from what we've brought to market. It's a SaaS product, self-serve, low touch. So what we did was work with sales enablement and build a lot of collateral that was shared, and it was an educational journey for sales and customer enablement people to understand what this product meant, how it could be positioned and messaged out to a prospect. And once those partnerships with our sales folks were established, it got to be a lot less challenging and easier to position this product. Marketing and promotion, we made a very clear decision early on that we weren't going to be promoting the marketplace itself. What we were going to be promoting were the APIs, and wait till we had a critical mass of APIs in order to actually promote the marketplace itself. So we went a little bit small with a shoestring budget. We went with email campaigns, blast outs to known customers and prospects. And got the word out that way versus going big. So those are some of the key pillars that we worked through. One thing that Jason also did bring up was around the business and technology partnership. I will say, I cannot emphasize enough that having a visionary leader, which is what we had, who understood the confluence of the API economy taking off and how rich depth and breadth of APIs that IQVIA actually had, would be a perfect marriage to then launch the commercial use of our APIs for our prospects and customers out there. That was critical to just getting this sponsored and off the ground. And then he brought me in to then execute on that. And execution obviously is the other half, or in fact, even the 75% of getting to critical success of any new product launch. Now I'm going to go to the next slide where I walk you through the actual marketplace and how the customer flow works for us. As you can see here, we have a registration page. Like I said, it's self-serve. You come in, you register, give us some very key information, not too many things to fill out. Once you sign up, you get an email that says, hey, welcome, and reset your password. You create a new password, and once that is confirmed and meets the criteria, you land on our collection of NLP APIs. Once here, you will self-educate, figure out if there's a specific API that meets your need to build and extend your product. This is the page where you navigate and get all that information. And then now you're going a little deeper into the commitment. You're actually subscribing using the free tier that we offer you. Here you select whether you have you go with the EU version of the API or the US version, and accordingly you are given the right agreement, whether it's a DPA or a BAA, depending on where you are. This was a bit of a work for us because we had to be GDPR compliant, being where we are in the industry. And then once you're there, you can actually interact with the API through our API console, which is what you're looking at. In here, you picked the application you just created with the right version of the API, and you choose the file to upload because that's how this API's input parameters are. Once you send that through, the API responds with the correct format that is required based on the file that you just uploaded. And the other nice thing is you also get to see how many units you've used of your subscription tier that you're allowed. So that's the general API customer flow. On the next slide, I'm going to be talking about the APIs that are currently available in our marketplace. They're all called the NLP, Natural Language Processing APIs. Basically, they take unstructured text and can pull out certain markers related to patient cohort markers. And we have about 200 million such documents, or you can bring your own and digitize those by extracting these markers. Currently, the subscription tiers are around 5,000 free units every month. If you go past that point within the month, there is a pay-as-you-go credit card integration that we pulled off with the partnership with Hypercurrent, and that's been extremely, not only was it a path-breaking kind of endeavor, but also it's been extremely satisfying, gratifying to see that in action. With that said, this is the end of my slides and the talking about the journey that we went through at IQVIA. And I am going to hand it back to Jason.
Okay. So just to wrap it up and close, the three key points that I'd leave you with is, don't make this a technology project. That's probably landed it by now. Technology is very important, but make sure you're bringing business executive sponsorship together with technology sponsorship. Neither one on its own works well. Look across the business to find that latent demand. And if you're not sure where to look, like if you think, I know people are using our APIs, but I'm not actually sure who to ask, whether there's more to come there. What we've seen be successful is go talk to your sales teams, your customer success teams, or even just do some interviews internally and ask, in which places are we still exchanging information very inefficiently? Where are batch processes happening? There's a lot of that happening in banks still, and the opportunity to move that to an API world where that can be pay per use or paid by the size of the payload is a good place to start converting. And then start the simplest you can. Get out of the gates and then move on from there with complexity. If there's any other questions, I'll step out afterwards to answer any. If anybody in the room is in healthcare, this is a QR code that'll get you to the IQVIA's marketplace. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you very much. We're a few minutes for some questions. Yeah, one question there. Run.
Thank you, and thank you for presenting.
Sure.
When you're working with that first partner to build out the platform, how do you prevent yourself from overfitting to their requirements?
From over what?
Like overfitting or customizing too much to just what they
Yeah.
want.
I think it's important to set some scope with the partner when you start off about your objectives versus theirs, and sort of agreeing to an MVP mindset with the partner, because you're right, they can drag you down a path that you don't want to go down. And I think it's important there, if they understand the value that they're getting out of that, is they're getting, let's say, a half-price product, that's common, that it's easier to steer them back and just say, look, within the confines of what we've agreed price-wise, we can't deliver all of these features. Good question.
I have a question about the strategy that has been there. There is a quote that I like, is that don't think what's the best business model for your APIs, but what are the best APIs for your business model. Like monetization, marketplace. What are you trying to achieve with the marketplace aspect with the opening API? So, how the discussion have been conducted, if you can share, of course.
Yep.
But how the discussion have been conducted with, I don't know how to pronounce IQVIA.
IQVIA.
Yep. IQVIA.
Yep.
IQVIA, right? On that topic, like it was a marketplace for a marketplace, or no? It's like, okay, we want to build an ecosystem of application. You want to have, feed all the channels, or
Yeah, good question. So in their case, they actually have ambitions to have a much broader marketplace over time, because IQVIA is a huge company. And what the strategy that Rina's put together is that this NLP group was the first one willing. And so in their public marketing, they're de-emphasizing the marketplace a lot and marketing the APIs directly, because their first priority was actually, let's look at businesses that could be fast-forwarded through the use of APIs, as opposed to starting with a marketplace and then going from there. So they're really going business by business, which is, I think it's the first version of what you said. Where could APIs extend my business versus trying to just fill in a marketplace?
Okay, that sounds good. Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you
Thanks,
very much
everyone.
for we can thank him. Yeah.